Assalamu alaikum and good evening. This is Witness and I'm your host, Quatrina Hossain. If you have been following this program for the past few weeks or days even, you will have noticed that a number of politicians have appeared on this program and talked about Pakistan's economic crisis. Some politicians have even said that the domestic borrowing of this government, the domestic and external borrowing of this government, is almost equal to that of the previous 64 years of combined governments. Other people have said that the government is printing anywhere between 3 to 1 billion rupees per day. The Economic Survey of Pakistan tells us scary statistics. The prices continue to rise. Monetary policy of this country seems to be at best chaotic. Well, is that just a journalistic perspective? Is that just a point being scored by the opposition against the current government? Or is there some truth to these figures which are indeed disturbing? I have to admit that when the numbers go into billions and trillions and the amount of zeros that get involved make me go cross-eyed. But we have experts with us today who are going to try and sort all this out for us. Allow me to introduce my guests here in the studio. My first guest is Mr. M. Ziauddin. He is the executive editor of the Express Tribune, and his fans and his readers will of course remember and recall his columns, predominantly many of which have been focused on the political economy of the country through the years. My second guest today is Dr. Hassan Rana. He is an internationally known political economist. And joining me from Karachi is Dr. Salman Shah. He is the former finance minister of Pakistan and an expert at economic issues. But before I begin the program, I must share with you all a fable, if I may, and I want my guests to particularly listen to this. There's an entry-level test for 3 people applying for a job. One is a banker, one is a marketing consultant, and the third is a political spin doctor. They're given an entry-level exam on which it says 2 plus 2 is equal to. The banker says, how do you expect me to answer this question when I don't have the data going back at least 10 years to be able to see tracks, trends, etc., etc. The material is provided to him and he carefully writes down 2 plus 2 is 4. The marketing consultant says, I can't even begin to look at this question without having all the relevant sales and marketing statistics for the past 10 years. That data is provided to him and after studying them, he writes down 2 plus 2 is equal to 4. The spin doctor smiles and says, what do you want the answer to be? That perhaps is the most interesting part about figures. They can guide you, they can mislead you, or they can tell you the real picture on the ground. It depends on who is presenting those figures and how. Well, that's what we're going to try to also get to the bottom of today. Mr. Ziauddin, I'll begin with you. Jokes aside, because it's a serious subject, but I thought I'd leaven the heavy-duty economic storm clouds. The opposition has been charging that this government has been absolutely reckless in its borrowing, and in fact one of the reports frequently cited in this program has been the Economic Survey of Pakistan, particularly page number 126, where it talks about the domestic debt and the external debt of this country. What is going on? This government seems to be borrowing up to anywhere between 2 billion to 3 billion rupees a day, printing the money. Is that correct? And if so, why is this happening?
Well, Quatrina, the economy is in a mess. That is a fact of life. I mean, nobody can defend that situation. And if you look at the tax to GDP ratio, it's horrible. Perhaps among the UN members, Pakistan stands at the lowest rung on this.
Okay, because a lot of my viewers are not people who are familiar with economic terms. So when you say tax to GDP ratio, you're talking about the money that is collected via taxes in Pakistan against the money that is spent. Gross domestic product.
Yeah, I mean the income, the entire income.
Entire income.
And expenditure and all, if you add it up. And then in that, the taxes which is collected is horribly low. When you have in a situation like that, and it's not something which has happened only in the last 3.5 years.
It's always been like this.
It's been all along. Even during those days when we used to get billions of dollars, unencumbered billions of dollars in the 80s and in the
post 9/11
2000. Yeah. So even during that period, our tax to GDP ratio
has
was
been a
very,
disaster.
very low. In that kind of a situation, if you have this flood of the century, then when your country is at war, and this war is not the war, is not like the war which Musharraf fought. When Musharraf was fighting this war, the war was on the other side of Durand line. And most of the dollars were coming into Pakistan when the blood was being shed on the other side of Durand line.
Okay.
But today, the blood is being shed inside Pakistan when there are no dollars. So, and then the rains, the last rains.
Last year's floods, this year's floods.
Yeah. So you are at war, and it could be turning into a civil war. That is the kind of a situation I foresee. And you have floods of the century. When your rich people don't pay taxes, what do?
You
there is no, and then you have to have weapons to fight the war.
Okay, I'm going to get into this further because we also will talk about the coalition support funds, which the United States
You're not
provides.
getting it. You're not getting it.
But some of the areas have been paid.
Yeah, part of it has been paid. Part
of it has not been. Yes. Dr. Rana, here's a really tough point over here. As a layperson, and many of my viewers are laypersons as well, so that's why I'll ask all of you to keep it reasonably understandable for people who are not familiar with these terms. What is the government spending the money on beyond the war on terror and the floods? Because again, the floods, we didn't really do a lot. A lot of it came from international donors, and we saw the condition of the people. They didn't really get that kind of support they needed. So if the government is do you dispute this figure that the government is printing 2 to 3 billion rupees a day?
No, absolutely not. I think it's a very significant number which has been bounced around almost from all the relevant quarters. Now, and I'm just going to, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that that economy is bad, because yesterday there was this thing that one of my people who used to work for me, I met his mother-in-law who was visiting from the village, and she was to go to the hospital. So I just stopped and just, because she was an old woman, I stopped and offered my respects. And she said to me that the economy of the country is very bad.
So this is a woman from the village.
The woman from the village.
You don't need an economist to know that the economy is
I don't think that you need a postdoctoral fellowship in political economics to know that Pakistan's economy is bad. So I'm not going to sit here and tell your viewers that it's bad. It is. Question here is this, that what steps needs to be taken, and that here lies the answer of the question that you've just asked. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? What's the problem with this government? The problem is this, that previous governments, even when they were in power previously, and all the previous governments, if you look at them, because being a political economist, I've actually studied the system of governments that have been put in place, not the ones that you read in the book and what your constitution tells you, but the systems of the governments which have been put in place in order to run the business of the country. So that's completely different ball game altogether. So you come to a conclusion, and allow me to be extremely candid with you here.
Please do.
Previously, people used to be corrupt. Now, people are corrupt and incompetent.
Oh, charming.
That's a very, very lethal combination. Because I'm not going to sit here and say and blow sunshine and say that, oh, well, we are the only corrupt country in the world. Believe you me, where there are human beings, there is corruption. Pick any, it's just the level that how different it is. Problem with us is this, that A, we are incompetent. B, we don't know how to be corrupt. That's another. We
don't know how to be corrupt. I think
yes.
You could write the book on it.
No, it's the problem is this, because every country has it, but they would never take decisions which would detrimentally affect the larger picture of the country. Now, when you're talking about economics, and when you're talking about what are we going to do about these things.
We'll come to the solutions later. I want to first go to Dr. Salman Shah in Karachi and get his perspective on this whole situation. Dr. Salman Shah, you have obviously been involved with the previous government, with the caretaker government. Of course, you're the finance minister. One of the things that is a figure that is often cited by politicians, and I'd like to get your take on it, is that the domestic borrowing of this government, which is the money that this government has borrowed from the State Bank, in 3.5 years is almost equal to the money borrowed in numerical terms, this what was borrowed by previous governments in 64 years. This is a figure that has been cited by various opposition leaders on this program. Do you agree with that statistic? And when answer that question, I'll come to my second one.
Yes, I think that's the data is available, and total debt has increased from around 5 trillion rupees to about 11 trillion rupees. So it has, in fact, in the last 3 years, you have added more debt than what you added over the last 60 years. But that is not the entire story, because the economy is much larger now than even 10 years ago, or for example in 1999 the economy was only $60 billion, and today you're talking about $180 billion of the economy. And if you look at your deficits, the fiscal deficit today, if you do about 6% deficit and you finance it entirely by borrowing within the country, that would add to about $1 trillion rupees in the year, and that means about 3 billion a day. So it's the fiscal deficit which we have not been able to control, and if you can bring it down to 4%, then you will be needing about 700 billion, and so you will be borrowing about 2 billion a day, and if you can reduce it to 3%, then you will need lesser borrowing. So basically, the fiscal deficit is being driven. Pardon me?
How do you reduce it? You're saying if you can reduce it to this much, you can reduce it to this much. Money borrowed, in my language, means money that has to be returned. So where do we get the money to repay this?
Well, I think when you are talking about domestic borrowing, then the government has the ability to print money, and that can be very inflationary. But I think if you really want to curtail your borrowing, you have to curtail your fiscal deficits, and the fiscal deficit happens because of both sides. One is your revenue side. You have to increase your revenues, and the other side is you have to decrease your expenditures. Now, I think when we look at the Pakistani situation, when the economy is in doldrums, and basically the investments in the economy have more or less dried up, from investment to GDP of around 23 or 24%, we are down to about 11 to 12%. So that means that approximately $20 billion which could have been invested in the country every year is not being invested compared to the past, and that slows down the economy. And when the economy slows down, you have higher unemployment, you have businesses losing money, you have non-performing loans, and in this environment, raising the taxes is an extremely difficult proposition. So the situation is that not only is the government borrowing too much, the private sector is not borrowing at all, and the banking sector has kind of crowded out the private sector, so the banks feel very comfortable lending to the government at risk, without any risk to them, and they are not lending to the private sector, which is making things even worse. So the economy is now stagnating, and I think Mr. Rana said it's incompetence and corruption. I think it's also incompetence by the International Monetary Fund, that they really had an IMF program which slowed down the economy so much that it has gone into a tailspin, and they have very conveniently packed up their bags and left this country. Whereas I think they left us in a very bad mess also. So it's not only incompetence within the country, it's incompetence almost at the international level. And that incompetence you also see in global markets, in United States and in Europe and other places. So I think it's incompetence all around, but in our particular case, We have had a huge dose of incompetence and a huge dose of corruption, and that's why people don't want to pay taxes either. So I think the governance issues are really now hurting us, and the results are that some of our companies, particularly in the public sector, you have the railways not being able to make their salary payments. You have the steel mill which hasn't paid its workers for the last 2 months. And pretty soon, I think other organizations in the public sector would find it very difficult to pay salaries to their workers, because you can't run inefficiencies for indefinite periods. You have to make sure that everything, particularly on these PSEs, there is some measure of efficiency over there, some measures of governance over there. If you won't have that,
sir,
then everything is going to go down and down.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt you here because it's time for me to take a short break. When we return, I want to ask, is Pakistan facing fiscal and monetary Armageddon? The reason I ask that question is really simple. We want to talk about the worst case scenario. I'm thinking in terms of Argentina and the fact where the money supply in Argentina collapsed. There was a run on the banks ran out of money, and there was fiscal chaos in Argentina. I think it was a couple of years ago, maybe a little more, I'm not exactly certain. But the point is, first we'll talk about the worst case scenario that Pakistan faces, and then we'll talk about what we can do to avert that worst case scenario. This and more after a short break. Please stay with us. Welcome back to Witness. Today we are trying to shed light on the country's economic situation. We have discussed it frequently with political guests. Today I'm joined by financial, economic, political economy experts who are going to try and shed some light. I'm not going to take you into the realm of the worst case scenario. I'm not saying we stand there. I am saying I'm taking you to look at the worst case scenario and then see how we can prevent falling into that. The worst case scenario, Ziauddin Saab, that people have told me when I talk to business people or other people, they paint these lurid pictures of a rupee that devalues so that you need 1,000 rupees to buy a loaf of bread because the rupee will crash in its value. So to buy a roti, you will need 1,000 rupees. If you want to buy groceries for the month, you'll need to pile up the cash in your car to be able to do it. And we have seen this happen in other countries of the world. So it's not entirely unrealistic. Is Pakistan facing a situation where it could, in a couple of years, more or less, end up in that situation where the rupee loses its value completely?
It could, Quatrina, but then again, Pakistan is blessed with good agricultural land.
Okay.
We have water as well as of today.
Yes.
And we could use it. And for food, I don't think we will be facing that kind of a situation which
so food
other
security
countries
is not as bad as what could happen elsewhere.
It could become bad if we don't properly look after our agriculture sector, which I think if you go to the villages now, things are perking up there.
Yeah, I have noticed that.
Yes, the money has been transferred from the urban sector to the rural sector. And most of the low market cosmetics, soaps and all, their demand is increasing there, and people are purchasing that.
So the purchasing power in the rural economy
even
is
the
up.
Chinese motorcycles, the sales of those Chinese motorcycles has gone up in the rural areas.
Right.
So that's
a sign of prosperity.
There's a sign of not a prosperity, the sign of things looking up. We could exploit those things, and we could bank on that and go on the back of
Which
those.
is what this government has done, hasn't it? They increase the wheat support prices. They have favoured the farmer. Do you think that's been a good policy?
It's a good policy, very good policy. Because
but at the expense of the urban workers?
Well, you see, the problem with the urban the urban sector is, I don't think this is a problem, but we have been, over the last 60 years, we have been transferring resources from rural to urban all these years. No, we must do some kind of a balancing act as well there.
That's so exactly what. Yeah. Ziauddin, let me ask you this question, because my fear, for example, is that you have a cotton crop and you depend on that heavily for cash crops. And I remember in the 90s there was this thing called the leaf curl virus, which almost decimated our cotton crop. So my concern is that if we put all our eggs in the agricultural basket, any natural disaster like floods, like viruses, like crop failure, could wipe us out. So shouldn't there be a balance between manufacturing industry and
see, manufacturing
and rural?
what? Manufacturing what? See,
Something.
Pakistan has comparative advantages in agro-based industries,
Right.
not in automobile industry. And we have been spending lots and lots of resources in developing engineering goods industry. I had done a study in the late 90s on engineering goods industry. We've just spent money and nothing has gone up.
Nothing has come up.
See, Pakistan
But sir, you know,
could
this
get
pen
out
I'm
of...
holding,
Yeah.
this pen I'm holding, this is probably imported from China.
Could be, yes.
You know, we don't manufacture anything in this country. Don't you think this is a problem?
No, it's not a problem.
It's not a problem.
We should provide the cheapest possible, consumer goods to the people. And if you can get it from the imported, from sources outside the country, why not? But then again, we have to take a overall, change the entire economic, attitude. See, we could develop into a, warehouse economy. By warehouse
Which is
economy,
what?
I mean, you reduce the tariffs on raw materials and intermediaries.
Okay.
And then bring those, increase manufacturing here and pass it on to the other countries. See, from Casablanca to Urumqi, we could become the hub of
like Dubai
yes,
sort of does.
Just
in a way,
value
right,
add.
trading.
In a huge manufacturing, but just value add and pass it on to the other countries.
Pass it on to other
So
countries.
that way we could.
Do you see that kind of thinking? Do you see that kind of thinking happening in this
I
country?
have not seen. Most of our civil servants who have been taught, and civil servants and the IMF, those people who've been taught in say Harvard and MIT and all, they perhaps think that manufacturing is the thing. See, this is an interdependent world. It's a globalized
Dr.
village.
Hassan Rana is smiling.
Yes,
Because do you agree or disagree?
No, I'm partly agree to Sir on this. Ziauddin Saab, I dare disagree with him on my peril, I'm sure. But he's right. You have to take some really, really smart steps. Look, any economy in the world would respond to intelligent steps. Economy is kind of a patient. If you look at it, it's kind of a dengue patient.
Okay.
Or you can actually have, if I can use that metaphor for it. We are a dengue patient. We are lying there. The problem is that we have not put the mosquito net
Right.
around him. We are not giving him platelets, and it's already infected as well with another thing. So that's, yes, when you say that...
Is the mosquito the IMF?
Mosquito is the IMF, which has bitten it actually, and
Right.
has given it to... and of course, we are also part of it as well.
You see, here's where please excuse my little tangents off here and there, but I'm a very tangent-oriented person. The IMF, you all call it International Monetary Fund. I call it Internal Monetary Fiasco.
Yes, absolutely.
So we have to
Absolutely. If you look at it from the perspective of the country which is actually suffering it, then yes, it is exactly what you have just said. Now the problem is that what are you going to do when you are a patient which is not treated right now, this very moment, the conversations that should be happening, they should be, this conversation that we are having right now, this is the conversation that these guys should be having day before yesterday.
Right.
One of the major issues, and sir, and if I was to look at development economics, there's nobody better than Salman Shah. I would always pick him every day of the week and twice on
Right.
Sunday. He will tell you, and he will tell you, as long as you don't control your population growth rate, it would not be possible for you to do anything. Then there are steps that you need to take which are intelligent and smart steps. The first and the foremost step that you need to take is this, that you have to come up, as you have a defense and strategic policy, which is international, and all the parties agree on to it. You have to come up with a foreign investor protection plan. The other thing, when Dr. was saying, yes, it is important for us to develop the agriculture economy, absolutely. We need to, because that's more of it. The other most important aspect that we need to kind of, because again you were saying, then we should make something. Why not? I mean, absolutely, make something, do something, and employ people who you are producing anyways. So another place where you would be able to generate a lot of money and are able to generate a lot of you can say employment as well, and a lot of other supportive industries can run because of it, is your mining sector, which mining sector has been neglected over many and many years, and these are huge cash cows. Now, the problem is the way we have treated TTC, which was a Recodic project, the way that international organizations are going to be there to make profit.
Of course.
You can't blame them for making profit. You can't.
No.
You just have
that's why they exist. That's
why they exist.
To get a good deal.
If you are an organization which is a New York Stock Exchange, that means you're pretty good at making profit.
Yeah.
All you need to be is to smart enough to profit from their profit. Now, what you need to do is this. For example, there are multiple gold mines in Pakistan which are not yet explored. And gems. What you need to do is not only, okay, you have a major problem in terms of, okay, they take the raw material outside. Tell them, okay, fine, don't take the raw material outside, make processing plants here. Bring it onto the gold system so you exactly know what is going out, and your economy is benefiting from it.
Sri Lanka does that to a large extent.
Sri Lanka does that.
Because I've seen that in Sri Lanka.
Now, this is just one aspect, but this will give you an injection, this will give you a kickstart. And the most important aspect at this particular moment is this: you need to have somebody, all of these people who are going to be prospective leaders of this country, whether it's going to be Imran Khan, PMLN, whoever it is, I don't care, it could be Santa Claus. I want them to come on my television screen, sit there, look confident, and explain to me like I'm a 6-year-old that we are on the job and we are going to do something about it.
And this is
confidence
erosion, flight of capital.
Absolutely. Because again, economy is. I've been tired of saying this, especially on your program, that any economy of any country is 80% perception and 20% reality. Now, the conversation that we were having with this country, the government of this country is printing about 2 billion rupees a day. Now, if I'm sitting in a Fortune 500 company and listening to this program, believe you me, I would not touch this country with a 10-foot pole.
Obviously.
So you need to come up with smart, intelligent solutions. You need to communicate those solutions immediately.
And we hear them, so we have to follow through them. I heard about that one window. Dr. Salman Shah, I think it was during your tenure that we heard about the one window operation that would be set up for foreign direct investors. I don't know if it ever happened. But before you respond to that, I would also like to ask you to comment on the worst case scenario that I talked about, where people would actually have to spend 1,000 rupees on a loaf of bread or whatever. Can that happen in Pakistan? Can we go the Argentina way?
No, I don't think we'll go the Argentina way because, number one, as Ziauddin said, you have a fairly intensive agriculture sector, so food is not really going to be the issue. The only problem was that last time when they increased the price of wheat, they went overboard and increased it way beyond what even was in the international prices, and lots of people, actually you had a lot of food, but people couldn't afford to get that food. And the World Food Program, and they have suggested that food consumption has actually gone down in Pakistan because of the high prices. So I think it was a bad move to take the price so high that it went even beyond the international prices. Having said that, I think your banks are still very strong and they don't have the kind of balance sheets which can lead to a run on the banks. So I don't think that's an issue. The real issue is we have to stop the bleeding, and the bleeding is, number one, the public sector enterprises. They are chewing up at least 400 to 500 billion rupees from your budget, and the sooner you privatize them and turn this money into the social sector, into the education, higher education commission, and the health sector, and get rid of this baggage around your neck, which is the public sector enterprises. Secondly, I think
Dr. Salman Shah, I'm going to interrupt you right there because I have a question on that, a layperson's question on that. The Karachi Electric Supply Corporation was privatized, and yet its performance has been, to put it mildly, a debacle. So why would an average citizen support privatization of state-owned enterprises?
Well, number one, I think the Karachi Electric Supply Corporation privatization was not the best privatization, and Finance Minister Hafiz Sheikh, I'm sure, doesn't want to hear about KESC, but other privatizations have worked out fairly well, and even KESC can be fixed. It's not something that you can't fix it. you can fix it, but I think we have to get rid of this 400-500 billion which is going down the drain, and we must eliminate that. Secondly, I think the public sector development program is a big gravy train in which everybody dips, and a lot of corruption happens over there. We are spending about 600 to 700 billion on that, and I don't think we are getting the results, and we don't see where that money is going. So I would say that get rid of the PSDP, take it to public-private partnerships, do it on BOT basis or other basis, and lots of this infrastructure these days is being done in that fashion. And then I think the third thing which you could do very quickly is on the power sector, that there's no godly reason why we should be having load shedding when you have 23,000 megawatts of capacity and you are only producing about 12,000 megawatts because you are not able to afford the oil because it's thermal generated power, which is very expensive.
Shah, while we are on the
in the short run, you will have to live with it. But even in the medium run, you have to make Kalabagh Dam, you have to make Bhasha Dam, you have to make all these dams, which will give you almost free power, and also the water for your farms, which can turn even your deserts into a highly productive area. So these are certain things which are not pie in the sky. These are really right now. If you were to do these things, you could make a big difference. And then I think you have something which is called urbanization going on in Pakistan, and Pakistan is one of the fastest urbanizing country in this region, maybe in the entire world. And that means that you have a great opportunity for developing your cities as centers of manufacturing, as centers of services, as innovations, universities. So I don't see that Pakistan's potential, we have even scratched the surface. So Pakistan, with its size of markets, it has fairly decent sized markets. It has got a good base of intellect. It has, I think, the people are very hardworking, and we have a good location. We need to put our act together, and we can start moving at 8 to 10% a year very, very quickly. We don't have to wait for 10 years to do all of this thing. We can do it quite quickly, and I think that if you have a new face in the government in the next elections.
I want to return to this. Hold that thought, please, because I want to return to this. You've raised excellent points. I want to get the response from my guest here in the studio. Dr. Rana, I'll ask you first. I so agree with Dr. Shah when he says this country has so much potential. So one of the issues is that, you know, services, goods and services, so much stuff. Most people tell me that the state-owned enterprises, Pakistan Railways, Pakistan Steel, PIA, you name them, they're hemorrhaging wildly. Dr. Shah is recommending privatization. I would ask you that another suggestion that has been mooted by the Pakistan Muslim League N has been to change the Board of Governors and to bring in tighter management on these organizations. What is a better option, privatization or Board of Governors?
I can speak to you with complete authenticity about PIA first, because at one point in my time of my life, I was asked to become the managing director of that company.
Okay. Were you? I don't know. You didn't take it.
Normally I'm an intelligent human being. I was the gentleman who had communicated that to me. I actually said that I would like to go and see at numbers and obviously go and see different places before I can pick up, because I do have some experience in terms of aircraft manufacturing. So obviously, but I didn't have any experience in terms of, you know, running
airline management.
And airline management. So it was a new project for me. Once I went, did my visit, came back, so I'll just give you the quote-unquote conversation that I had with President Musharraf at that time. So he asked me, he said, well, what do you think when you can take over if you want to? So I said, sir, and can you correct it? And I said, well, sir, you don't need me, you need God for PIA. Because that's how bad it is. There is no, I don't see, I know many people in this area, but I don't see anybody who can do this. It's
Why
just
can't
not possible.
radical surgery on state-owned enterprises should be
no,
the
no, no, no,
answer.
no, no. There's not, they can't be a radical surgery on them. All you need to do, as far as PIA is concerned, you have to shut it down completely.
Shut it down.
Shut it down.
Dr.
Close it
Mr.
down
Ziauddin
now.
is saying no, no, no.
No, no, no. You shut it down now. You come up with a better strategy, because you have to look at it from two different angles. You cannot, if this patient is not going to die, it's on a ventilator. You need to pull that plug now, and then come up with a better plan, and then make sure that the next airline that you're making, because the potential again is there, as Dr. Shah
Yes,
just
of
said
course.
to you.
Okay. No,
you know,
I'm going to hold this thought here, because you're advocating a radical step here. Mr. Ziauddin, one of the things that comes to my mind is one of the world's best airlines is Emirates Airline, and it was set out by PIA people. What happened?
The problem is those people are now in Emirates.
They're now in Emirates.
Shaukat was much more innovative than Mr. Rana.
Shaukat
said, Shaukat Aziz.
Shaukat Aziz, yeah,
He said,
Shaukat Tarina Aziz.
he told General Musharraf to sell PIA for $1.
Sell PIA for $1.
Well, actually, I would go with what the PMLN has suggested. See, actually, I mean, these public sector organizations, at one point when the world was promoting public sector, organizations, they had this suggestion that they should be audited socially. Social auditing should also be done for
What's a social audit?
Social auditing is how many jobs you're giving.
Okay.
See, if you closed on railways and closed on PIA, all that you will end up with is unemployment, massive unemployment. So that is, you have to do social audit of these organizations as well. Not only the money.
I agree with you there,
Sir,
but look, we cannot, when a PIA is overstaffed by 300% over its competitors.
Can I add a little bit, sir?
Okay.
Sir, just
please,
to your question, sir.
Please.
Can I, the one thing as far as PIA is concerned, let me tell you one thing. If today you pay everybody's salaries for the rest of their lives, and I can sit across any accountant, any financial analyst can come and sit in front of me, I can run the numbers. You can pay anybody, all the employees of the PIA right now, you pay them their entire salaries till the time that they're going to retire.
Yeah.
All you need to do is tell them, don't come to the office from tomorrow onwards. You'd still end up making a profit.
You'd make a profit.
You'd still end up making a all you need to, because their aircraft and people ratio is so high that there is no possibility.
I'm told that PIA's staff to aircraft ratio is 300% more than other international companies?
Yes, it is.
I know.
Yes,
I know.
That's ridiculous.
See, privatization is also out because I recall New Zealand privatized the railways, but now they are getting back. They got it back again, because as we have this experience of KESK, privatization is not the real answer. You have to reform. I mean, reform can be done within these organizations.
Is any government capable of that? I mean, I have always seen these white elephants, sitting there.
Mrs. Thatcher and Mr. Reagan did what they did, and now those nations are reaping the real harvest. The kind of unemployment they're facing, both the countries. See, again, economy, as Dr. Rana has been saying, is a perception. You have to create the perception, and if you put the right kind of people in the board and try to reform these organizations, I think that could give that
help.
perception.
At least that's
that
a
could
step.
give the perception.
So between one extreme and another, my Dr. Shah and Dr. Rana both saying, as journalists are like, wait a minute.
Yeah, when you keep on talking about corruption, all that you do is you create that perception.
You create more of a perception. Let's talk, Dr. Shah, let's talk about one thing over here. And if you, of course, please feel free to comment on whatever discussion we've had over here. Do tell us if Shaukat Aziz tried to sell PIA for $1 or wanted to. But the real question, sir, I want to talk to you about is also the circular debt, because power is a critical need for anything we want to do in this country. And my fear, and please tell me if I'm wrong, because I'm very simplistic in these matters, but if I see that cotton units and small factories and cottage industries that produce t-shirts and cotton garments and all this kind of stuff was a large chunk of our foreign exchange revenue, if they have no power, they're not going to be producing anything. So what kind of impact is that going to have? Isn't power generation, shouldn't that be at the top of our list of recovery issues?
Let me first comment on what Ziauddin was saying. that you can put some good people on the board. I don't think it works. You can put the best people on the board, but if they don't have any stakes, they are not going to be successful. And we have seen, even in the power sector, on the distribution companies, they have private sector boards, and their chairmen are also from the private sector. But since they have no interest in it from their investment side, they are there, they have a they do their work and they go home, and they don't worry about what's happening in these companies. So putting private sector people or good people on the boards are not going to solve your problems. And we have seen, I mean, the steel mill, you had a good management, it was working, and before you knew it, the whole thing collapsed when you changed the management. So who is going to monitor this all the time? Tomorrow, when PMLN comes in, they'll put their cronies over there, and they will do exactly the same thing. So until you create a privatized kind of an entity with stakes in making it work, this thing will not produce the results. And the world has seen this in 60 years. We have seen that this kind of thing is, I mean, like it makes you feel good, but it doesn't produce the results. The second thing which you have mentioned about the circular debt, this is again highly corrupt power sector with lots of theft, with lots of incompetence, inefficiencies. So if from 30 to 40% of your power is lost and it never reaches your customer who is paying, it will never be a profitable kind of a thing. So you have to get the theft out of the way, you have to improve the efficiencies, you have to bring in the technology by which you can do it, and then in the medium term you have to build the dams. You can't just keep sitting on having the most expensive power in the world. So Pakistan right now has the distinction that we have added the most expensive power in the world to our network, most recently in terms of the rental power plants. So instead of going for the cheapest source of power, we are going for the most expensive source of power.
Okay.
And somehow
Dr. Shah,
we have muddled it
that I must
up
put
so
to you at this
badly
point,
that
which is very crucial. Dr. Shah, one question I want to put to you.
Me?
One of the criticisms made during your tenure was that liquidity in Pakistan became so high and credit became so cheap and easy that people bought up electronic appliances and all this kind of, massive influx of cheap appliances, cars, vehicles, you name it, washing machines. When we had always washed our clothes by hands, now every house has a washing machine that runs on power. That is a huge contribution to this almost doubling of the demand for power, and that during your tenure, no power projects were initiated. How do you respond to that?
Look, I think as I just mentioned, we have 23,000 megawatts of capacity, and we are only producing 12,000 megawatts. If you were to check the data today, I'm sure we would not have produced more than 12,000 megawatts. So we have substantial capacity. I don't understand why would you like to add more capacity when you can't even use your existing capacity. So that is not really an argument that you you have not added anything. By the way, if you look at the economic survey, and you can see in 1999 your capacity to produce was 15,000 megawatts, and today it is 23,000 megawatts. So this is total rubbish that nothing was added during this time period. So I think it is politics and distorting the facts, and which is really making this a problem that somehow there is no capacity, and if we just had the capacity, then things would be all right. We have the capacity, but we are not using that capacity.
We had 12 days
because
of no load shedding because
every unit, Quatrina, every unit the government produces, it has to pay a subsidy of 4 to 5 rupees per unit. So they think that maybe we should not produce and have the load shedding, so that the impact on your budget is not there. So
why? Mr. Ziauddin, why?
See, the oil in 2008 had gone up $150 a barrel.
Yeah.
So when Shah Sahab was the finance minister, it was around $60-70.
Right, per barrel. Yeah.
So in his days, the per barrel, the power, the per unit production of per unit electricity was not as expensive. And General Musharraf wasted almost 9 years debating whether he should construct Kala Bagh or not. He went around the country addressing people, are trying to play politics. I mean, trying to get their consensus.
But
he was a martial law. He was a military general. He could have started.
He could have just done it.
Just done
know,
he did not ask anybody when he was taking over.
Yeah.
He did not ask anybody when he was taking over. Why was he asking
Why was he trying to
everybody
build a consensus on Kala Bagh?
when he used to say that it's a matter of life and death?
Well, I have to put it on the record that I bluntly told General Musharraf that Kala Bagh time won't fly in Sindh.
Let me
Dr. Rana, briefly, I'm almost out of time.
Yes, let me second and answer one of the things that let's not blame somebody who actually brought, I mean, I don't know about anything, but as far as, interest rates in a country, that was probably the best time in Pakistan in terms of credit. Taking credit is not bad. Not returning it is bad.
Not returning it is bad.
The
Because liquidity was tremendous in those years.
The problem was not with the lowering of interest rates. Problem was absolutely not there. Problem is actually with the Contract Act agreement with you. Problem is with your legal system and with your justice system, the way that it operates and looks at contract acts in Pakistan.
I'm going to run out of time, but one quick question. Mr. Ziauddin, I'll let you take this. Electricity tariff for distribution company Ziauddin has been raised by an average of 30%, the highest increase in the country's history by NEPRA, and it's going to start from with retrospective effect. What kind of impact is this going to have, good or bad?
It's tremendously bad.
Tremendously bad.
It will impact on everyday life, on production, and perhaps even on export prices. So that's going to be a very, very highly expensive power.
Highly expensive
as
power.
Shah Sahab
Dr.
said.
Shah Sahab was saying.
Yes,
the government paid 11 billion rupees for the circular debt, and we had no load shedding for about 10 days. Load shedding is back.
See, again, sorry, Quatrina, most of the theft which Shah Sahab has been talking about is being committed by the rich people.
Absolutely.
Most of them, not only they don't pay taxes, they prefer electricity, they prefer gas, they prefer water.
Absolutely.
And those people make, these are the people who make policies. These are the people who are part of the ruling elite.
And also, incidentally, government. The ruling elite and the government organizations have not paid their power tariffs. I'm afraid I'm run out of time, even though I think I wanted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask all three of you gentlemen to return to talk about the power crisis. I think that's something crucial that we have to get into further depth on. I'm sorry that I don't have more time, but I'd like to thank my guests, Mr. M. Ziauddin, Dr. Hassan Rana, and Dr. Salman Shah, who is joining me from Karachi. I thank you all for participating in today's program. Sadly, as I said, we ran out of time. The government decision to raise power tariffs by up to 30% on average, so in some areas it's going to be higher, in some places it's going to be lower, could very well damage this economy further unless the circular debt is decreased. The circular debt is like almost, I hate the analogy, but it's like a dog chasing its tail. It's got to be, we've got to get rid of this. We've got to do something about this, and sanctimonious and biased statements are not going to do the job. I'm reasonably optimistic after today's program because my experts here are telling me we're not going to end up in kind of, economic failed status. But, and here's a huge but, that's no excuse for not getting the economy back on track. Quatrina Hossain saying Khuda Hafiz from Islamabad.